and I will wait until you put the slide. Thank you. Okay, we continue on the topic. Remember what topic we were studying this month with Pastor Lee? Mark. But what exactly in Mark? We were talking about suffering servant, right? And remember Pastor Lee, like from theology, he brought a lot of information about why Mark wrote this letter and how he revealed Jesus in this letter. And remember this evangel was the first evangel which we believe written before other evangelists. So today we continue this subject, and I'm going to talk on I named message "Dying Before He Died," and that's about Jesus Christ, about what happened to him and what happened in general in the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane, yes, thank you. But I want to start with a question to you. Okay, let's try again. Okay. Have you ever felt forsaken? Have you ever felt forsaken? Вы когда-нибудь чувствовали себя оставленным, забитым? I'll do some translate. It will be difficult for me to translate myself, but sometimes I will be making remarks so our folks who do not speak English could understand. Have you ever felt forsaken? I have at least two stories from my life when I felt forsaken. The first story is when I was four year old. We traveled to Moscow, and I know that my mom was sick, and that something happened to her. But you know what happened to me during a short time, not a long time, maybe up to the week. I appeared in an organization which, it's not a child care, it's an organization which was taking care of kids who were abused or, basically abused or had any other disturbance. And I'll tell you why I appeared this later, but I appeared in this. And it was it was my mom and grandma who was traveling to us we'll all travel to Moscow, but I appeared in this institution for up to a week, and very rarely I saw my grandma visiting me. It was horrible for me impression because I was surrounded by kids which had some issues. There were kids with mutilated genitalia. And I saw them, I was shocked. And I felt very terrible. Many years after I learned what happened actually, why I knew my mom was supposed to have a surgery. She had a tuberculosis of her right kidney, and this kidney must be removed. But it was fairly routine surgery, but something went wrong. And that wrong was that my mom has very poor blood clotting. And what happened to her after surgery, they couldn't stop blood. And she was about to die. But the good thing to be in Moscow is that you have access to all kind of new stuff. And what finally helped her, that they had a drug which was still experimental drug. And they told her, we give you this drug, it's still experimental, but this probably the only thing which could help you. And it's helped. The blood stopped. So, and that's what happened during these days, because my grandma, she was also a doctor. She had to be with my mom. It was a matter of her life and death. And we had no relative in Moscow which could take care of me. So I appeared for a week in this institution just because they couldn't find any other place. Imagine Moscow, like a little bit less than New York. So they couldn't. I appeared in this institution. Then I was moved to another, much better, like a sort of daycare. But it was such a big, had a great impact on me that even years after this, what happened to me, I had a fear to stay alone without parents. I had problems attending any camps when I would have to stay, any camps or other events where you should stay for a long period of time without your parents. I don't know, maybe you, maybe Janice, you as a doctor, you may have some explanation of this, but I connected this event which happened to me when I was 4 years old with what happened, with all the impact I had. So I had a feeling that I was forsaken, and I tried to, my fear was every time come alive whenever I had to stay alone again. Finally, eventually it's gone when I grown and, of course, living now without my family close. Now, another time I had a similar feeling when I was already, I think I was 9 years old, and in our city of Sevastopol, we were on the shore of the Black Sea, and it was very masculine for the boys to be in a sailboat sport, and that's where I was. Like in Canada, it's hockey, probably, right? In our city, it's very prestigious to be in a sailboat, and I was a part of the team, and we had a competition, and in competition, the tugboat, it's not tugboat, it's like a powerful scooter, it pulling all the boats, like up to 20 boats together in a row. We were tied together with ropes, and they were pulling us towards open sea, far away from the shore where the competition happened. And what happened on the way to this place, when the boat was tugging when the motorboat was tugging our sailboats, we ran on a shallow place, and a sailboat has a steering, and the steering is on the back of the boat, and it goes deep into the water. And when you run on a shallow place, what happened to my steering? All the clamps which was holding the steering to the boat was ripped off. The steering, I still had the steering, but it was in my hands, not in the place when it's supposed to be. Now, it was strong wind, and when we arrived to the place far away from the shore, the tugboat just dropped the ropes, and they went back for the next group of sailors. And I was in the middle of the sea, far away from the shore, in a boat which still had the sails but had no steering. Well, the wind was strong, the boat started sailing, going itself, and I had no means to steer. Well, I looked for the help, and I realized there's no one cares about me. There are only boys like me who even didn't know what I had a problem with. And I panicked. I was thinking what I'm going to do. Have you ever been in a boat without rows? Without oars. That's like a similar. I had a sail, but no means to steer. And you cannot steer just moving your sail. You won't go far. So generally, then, at some point, I heard far away the voice through that speaker, how we call it, megaphone, yeah. So to the megaphone saying, Igor, put boat in Levant. It's a French word. Levant means put boat against the wind, so you can stop at least. Well, and it was the voice of my coach. And I saw far away in another motorboat, my coach was trying to catch up with me. Finally, he caught up with me, he fixed the steering. But I had, for maybe 10 minutes, I had this feeling that I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm alone on my own. There is no one to help me. I wasn't in church at that time. So there are two events happened to me when I felt like I was forsaken. And now why I'm talking about this, because I was thinking about these experiences when I was reading story of Jesus in Garden of Gethsemane. In Mark chapter 14, verse 32 through 36, we are reading the following. Then they came to a place which was named Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I pray. And he took Peter, James, and John with him. And he began to be troubled and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch. He went a little further and fell on the ground and prayed that if it were possible, the hour might pass from him. And he said, Abba, Father, all things are possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Nevertheless, not what I will, but what you will. Now, imagine the scene. Jesus, before, was with his disciples. This is a picture, kind of, the artist imagined it this way. So, his disciples were his friends. He called them his friends. In an upper room, they were sitting, they were talking. He was openly conversed with them. They celebrated Passover. He taught them and he prayed for them. But as he neared to Gethsemane, he became strangely silent. That's what Ellen White was writing about this event. Never before had they seen him so utterly sad and silent. As he proceeded, this strange sadness deepened. Yet they dared not question him as to the cause. His form swayed as if he were about to fall. Upon reaching the garden, his disciples looked anxiously for his usual place of retirement, that their master might rest. Every step that he now took was with labored effort. He groaned aloud as if he suffering under the pressure of terrible burden. Twice his companions supported him or he would have fallen to the earth. So, we see from this description that Jesus was in heavy state. And the question, probably which disciples also asking themselves, what is going on? They never ever seen his master in such depression. And finally, they arrived at his favorite place in Gethsemane. So he left most of the disciples near the entrance, taking only Peter, James, and John with him, and then also leaving him not far away from him. And he started praying to his Father. So those three disciples were close friends. Again, there were Peter, James, and John. These people observed his glory and heard his voice from and heard the voice from heaven. Remember when they were on the mountain of transfiguration, it's the same three disciples were with them, and they heard voice from heaven, and now he needed their presence. Often after, so that wasn't the first time they were together for prayer. Often after watching and prayer, they would sleep at a little distance from their master until he awoke them to go to the new labor. But today, he wants them to spend night with him and in prayer. So what was so heavily pressing on him? What was so heavily pressing on Jesus that his behavior changed so drastically? This is an interesting question, because now we have to think about this. Jesus, who was Jesus? Was it God or human? Well, you probably heard both, right? But now follow me carefully, because this is very important. Jesus, the human, was about to face Satan. Not Jesus the God, not Jesus the God. Jesus, human, was about to face the Satan in all his non-human power. But Jesus was facing him as who? As human. He must die as the worst sinner on the earth. And that's not over-exaggeration. When I say he must die as the worst sinner on earth, because his Father laid on him the iniquity of all of us. We cannot imagine it. But he was feeling as all the murderers, thieves, adulterers, and etc. together. Because Father was no longer with him. What happened in Gethsemane? Father was no longer with him. In contrast with us, Jesus, now also think about this fact. In contrast with us, Jesus never ever been separated with his Father before. Did you listen to this? Did you hear this? In contrast, in us, opposite to us, Jesus never ever been separated with Father before. Ellen White writing further, and what was to be gained? And now he's facing devil. Now he's facing devil, and devil comes to him with very logical argument. And you know, that's what Ellen White is writing interestingly. And what was to be gained by his sacrifice? How hopeless appeared the guilt and ingratitude of man. Look, listen, see what was happening, and that's true. The people who claim to be above all others in temporal and spiritual advantages, which means the priests, the scribes, so these people, they rejected him, and they're seeking to destroy. Devil say, look at them. They seeking to destroy you, the foundation, the center and seal of the promises made to them as a peculiar people. Now, one of Jesus' disciples who has listened to your instruction and has been among the foremost in church activities will betray you. One of your most zealous followers will deny you, Peter, right? And all your disciples will forsake you. That's arguments which Jesus was facing when he was separated with Father. And the truth is that Jesus did not know in his condition. Remember what condition was? He was separated with Father. In his condition, Jesus did not know of how everything is going to work out. Are you with me? In his condition, Jesus knew all future, but because he lived with Father, and now Father departed from him. Why? Because he put all our iniquity on him. In these conditions, Jesus had no ability to see what's going to happen and how all of his doing will finally work out. With separation from Father, the darkness covered him. As 100% human and 100% God, but in this case, 100% human, he didn't see future and any solution for the problem. Now, I want to step a little bit aside of my sermon, and because I heard many times as people saying about when they were speaking about Jesus in Gethsemane and on the cross, saying Jesus was God. He knew that God Father is going to resurrect him. Did you hear this? Or maybe you asking yourself same question? Now, this statement sounds for me like this, if we say in this way, we presenting Jesus as a hypocrite. Are you with me? And do you know why? Because if you consider what Jesus said in Gethsemane, if you consider what he said when he was on the cross, Father, Father, why you forsake me? Remember his words? And if you think that he was saying these words knowing that Father is going to resurrect him, then he is hypocrite. He's an actor. Are we saying that God play and act in front of us, and Jesus was climbing something which he did not believe is going to happen? The truth, that's why we cannot say the evidence of his words telling us that with the separation from God, darkness covered him, and he was not able to see how his sacrifice is going to work out. Do you agree with me? Jesus had zero ability to see as a human how his sacrifice is going to work out. And this is condition he was. That's why I started my sermon today about, have you felt about ever forsaken? Jesus, do you think Jesus felt forsaken at that point? His words telling us he was feeling. Moreover, his words, he asked his disciples to do something for him. Do you remember what he asked disciples to do? To pray. He asked them to pray with him. And now, reading from Desire of Ages, Ellen White is writing the following. The human heart longs for sympathy in suffering. If you had suffering, you probably was looking for sympathy. He was suffering and he was looking for sympathy. This longing Christ felt to the very depth of his being. In this supreme agony of his soul, he came to his disciples with a yearning desire to hear some words of comfort from those whom he had so often blessed and comforted and shielded in sorrow and distress. The one who had always had words of sympathy for them was now suffering superhuman agony, and he longed to know that they were praying for him and for themselves. But he finds them asleep. Had he found them praying, he would have been relieved. Had they been seeking refuge in God, that satanic agencies might not prevail over them, he would have been comforted by their steadfast faith. And she continues, now, what happened when he found them asleep? Did he blame them? They couldn't support him? And that's what interesting, the development. They did not, his disciples did not intend to forsake their Lord. But they seemed paralyzed by stupor, which they might have shaken off if they had continued pleading with God. They did not realize the necessity of watchfulness and earnest prayer in order to withstand temptation. But even if his agony, we see Jesus did not blame them. His words, when he referred to them in Mark 14, verse 37, 38, he's actually, read these words and you will see he's actually looking for excuse for his disciples. Then he came and found them sleeping and said to Peter, Simon, are you sleeping? Could you not watch 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. And he said, the spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. They are not words of blame. He understands these people in flesh are weak. He's looking for excuse for them. Jesus not blaming his friends. And we're reading further to this story in Matthew 26:42. Again, a second time, he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. Ellen White, in Desire for Ages, writing on this verse, the awful moment had come. Now we're coming to the center of this battle. The awful moment had come. That moment which was to decide the destiny of the world. The fate of humanity trembled in balance. Christ might even now refuse to drink cup apportioned to guilty men. Are you with me? Christ had a choice at that point to stop and not going further. It was not yet too late. He might wipe the bloody sweat from his brow and leave man to perish in his iniquity. He might say, let the transgressor receive the penalty of his sin, and I will go back to my Father. Will the innocent suffer the consequences of the curse of sin to save the guilty? And she continues, 3 times has he uttered this prayer. 3 times has humanity shrunk from the last crowning sacrifice. But now, you can find this in Desire of Ages in chapter Gethsemane. But now, the history of the human race comes up before the world's Redeemer. He sees that the transgressors of the law, which means I and you, if left to themselves, must perish. He sees that helplessness of man. He sees the power of sin. He vows and lamentations, or the vows and lamentations of a doomed world rise before him. He beholds its impending fate, and his decision is made. He will save man at any cost of himself. He accepts his baptism of blood, that through him perishing millions may gain everlasting life. He has left the courts of heaven, where all is purity, happiness, and glory, to save the one lost sheep, the one world that has fallen by transgression. And he will not turn from his mission. He will become the propitiation of a race that has willed to sin. His prayer now breathes only submission. If this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink it, thy will be done. So my friends, he saw you and me struggling in our sins, not able to overcome them. He saw us fallen by sickness and temptations, going slowly but steadily to our death. And our Savior made his decision. He rejected his own life to save ours. And that's why I called sermon today Dying Before He Died. It happened not on a cross. It happened in Gethsemane. Jesus died, not physically, he died for himself, refused his life to save ours. As Isaiah wrote in chapter 63, verse 5, but there was no one to help, and I wondered that there was no one to uphold. Therefore, my own arm brought salvation to me, and my own fury, it sustained me. He was doing this all alone. There was no disciple, friend who would support him. He was fighting this battle alone. But what about his father? Sometimes people think about that Jesus bring himself in sacrifice so his father, God, could come down. That's a wrong impression of God. Despite his father separated from him, he was struggling with him. And that's what we find if we read John 16:34. Jesus, before this event, he told to his disciples, "Indeed, the hour is coming, yes, has now come, that you will be scattered, each to his own, and will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me." So, in the moment when mysterious cup was trembling in his in Jesus' hand, I think Luke describing that the mighty angel come to him, not to take this cup from him, but to strengthen him to drink it. Our Savior died in Gethsemane before he died on the cross. Not physically, but by rejecting himself for me and you. His temptation was to save himself, but he died for himself. Remember, temptation of dear Jesus Christ was different from ours. Our temptation is live without God, but his temptation was live with God. And now he had to be without God in order to become full substitution for us. So he rejected himself to save us. And the question today is, what a response do you give seeing what Jesus done for you? What a response do you give to Jesus seeing him dying for you? He did not have to do this for us. Remember, he did not have to do this for us. John chapter 10, verse 17-18, is telling, "Therefore my Father loves me, because I laid down my life that I may take it again. No one takes it from me." You see? No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This command I have received from my Father. So Jesus had an option. He chose you. And who do you want to choose? And we'll finish this message with a song.